So let's talk about the tank control system. In this video, we're going to have a bit of an overview of what's going on. We're going to talk about how we're going to support keyboard, mouse, and the gamepad controller. We'll be talking about mapping player intentions to control inputs, mapping control inputs to actor actuators. Actuators is a bold-sounding thing, really. We're just rotating actors or moving actors. And we'll be introducing the concept of fly-by-wire. So let's start talking through it. Basically, as part of this iterative cycle, we've had a go on the world. There's a huge amount more we could do on landscapes, but we've done enough for now. So next we're going to look at these three steps, kind of all in one: the tank, the controls, and player 2. We need to come up with a control paradigm that obviously moves the tank, and we need to think about the different components of the tank. We then need to come up with some controls that make sense. And then we need to, at the same time, think about how player 2, whether that player 2 is a human or an AI, would actually control the tank. So that's what we're going to look at now. Later we'll go back through user interface and then back round to the world. This cycle is not a particularly set in stone cycle, it's just something that we're following for this particular section. So control inputs, keyboard and mouse, as I said, and Xbox controller is what we're going to be using for this section. You don't need to have one. If you have got one, great. An Xbox 360 controller should plug directly into the USB port of your PC and work without any troubles. You can also use other types of controllers if you wish. We are going to be assuming for this section that we have a couple of analog triggers on the controller. But as I say, it's not essential. You can still test and use this game without. So let's look at the major tank components. There are three major components to consider in the tank, and they all can move somewhat independently. You've got the white base, which is the tank body. Of course, there's two tracks on that. It can move forward and backwards and rotate. Of course, it can't strafe. Then we've got the blue. The blue is the turret, and that is going to contain the people's heads and hold on to the barrel. And then, of course, the barrel there in red, which can elevate up and down. So the turret, the blue, can rotate. The tank can translate and rotate, but it can't strafe sideways, and then the turret's up and down. So pretty obvious stuff, but just want to be clear on they're the major components we're dealing with. So what I want to do is start talking about the control system. Now, I'm sorry that I can't animate this table in how I would like to on Google Slides, but I'm just going to take it from top left onwards. Firstly, let's get the layout of the table. We're talking about the control intention, the intention of the player or the AI or the second player. Then we're going to talk about what would happen in a manual control paradigm. Then fly-by-wire. Now, fly-by-wire, what that means will kind of come clear at the bottom of the table. In simple terms, manual control is where you directly actuate something, like you move a track forward or back, where fly-by-wire is you set an intention, like I want to rotate the tank, and then maybe one track goes forward and the other goes back or whatever. So that's basically what fly-by-wire means. And then we'll also be clear on what the actuators are, the things that are actually going to be moved. So starting with the first movement, forward. If we want to go forward, we're symmetric on the triggers. I'm assuming that the two triggers of your controller here are, and by triggers, by the way, I mean back here, the two little things sticking out the top of that diagram, the actual left and right trigger, and they're analog. So if we were symmetric with our triggers, then we would be sending both tracks forward at the same speed. I'm assuming that the left trigger drives the left track and the right trigger drives the right track, and the degree to which you pull the trigger determines how fast the tracks move, because I think this could be quite a fun direct control system for the tank. So one option would be you pull the triggers in symmetrically and then you go straight forward. If one trigger's in more than the other, of course, you'll be turning to one side. But the fly-by-wire control could be the left stick going forward to indicate I just want to move forward. Or you could use the W key on the keyboard and then you would move forward at a constant speed. In the case of the left stick, of course, it would be an analog stick, so it's an analog speed. So let's think about backwards. Backwards, again, we could use the bumpers. And what are the bumpers? Well, on the controller, they are these things just above. So the triggers, the little guys sticking out here, the bumpers are the ones slightly closer to us in the foreground. They're actually digital, they're on or off. So what we could do with the bumpers is we could say that the bumpers put the brakes on if we're moving forward, and then immediately send us into a fixed speed reverse once we stop. That would be good enough. So symmetric bumpers would make us brake or go backwards. And also we could use the left stick or the S key. So I'm going for a standard WSAD as indicated on this picture of the keyboard over here. Okay, so that's an indication of the sort of controls. What I would like you to do as a challenge is to really think through these controls, because it's a very valuable exercise before we go diving in and actually making this happen. We want to know what control paradigm we're ending up with. So I want you to complete the control table. I'll flip back to the slide in a minute, but let me just brief you on it. I want you to finish the control intention table. There's no right or wrong way of doing this. The purpose is for you to think through this. We want fly-by-wire controls only on the keyboard and mouse. So think about how we could use the keyboard and mouse in a less direct way, because we don't really have enough analog axes on the keyboard and mouse. So maybe play a tank game, World of Tanks or War Thunder or something like that, and maybe follow the control system in those. And then with the controller, we want manual control and potentially fly-by-wire. So we just wanted more of a manual control element as an option on the controller, as I started to show you. So look, really there's no right answer here. As I say, just I want you to sit down and think about how control inputs would relate to outputs. So we'll go back to this table, and I want you to just finish it off, add another 3, 4, 5 rows to this table, as many as you see fit, and spend about 15-20 minutes maybe researching another tank game, and really just get into the mindset of thinking about how controls might work and the consistency of it and how it all kind of fits together. So go ahead, pause the video and do that now. So welcome back. Here's the challenge slide. Now there's going to be a face full of new lines in this table here, so we're going to work through it one at a time, and I'll use my mouse cursor to try and help you see through this. So boom, loads of stuff. Let's go down to strafe. Strafe is the next thing. Well, that's moving sideways. It's just not applicable to a tank. I don't know if you've seen the new 18 film with the B.A. Baracus when he says you can't fly a tank full. Well, you can't strafe a tank full either, so it's not going to happen. We're not going sideways in a tank. So we can forget that. But rotating the body, how would you do that? Well, you'd use asymmetric triggers or bumpers on the manual controller, or you'd simply use the left stick, left or right, if we're going for fly-by-wire control on the controller, or the A or D keys would be another way of doing that, and that would rotate. Tracks, different speeds. So that's the actuator. What we're saying here is that the actuator is the tracks, and in order to cause a rotation, they just need to move at different speeds. Any different speeds and it will rotate. How different the speed is determines how fast it rotates. So let's move down to rotating the turret. Well, I'm thinking, we'll deal with these two together actually, rotating the turret and elevating the barrel. So aiming is a shortcut for those two. I'm thinking we don't bother giving manual control on the controller for that. It's too much hassle, really, while you're trying to think about driving the tank as well. So we'll go for pure fly-by-wire, just like the controls in War Thunder. But what you do is you look into a particular direction. The camera goes immediately to that direction with the right stick or the mouse, and then shortly afterwards the barrel follows to that position. So both the elevation and the rotation move to that position after some time. They're limited in their speed. And the things you're actuating are the turret rotator and the barrel elevator. So it's pretty simple. So hopefully that gives you an overview of what we're trying to achieve with the tank controls here. It's pretty much as simple as that. What we're going to do next is dive in and start actually putting a very basic blockwork tank together, and then we'll start thinking about how we control this thing both in C++ and with a little bit of blueprint where it makes our life easier. So see you there.